Hi, my name is Rick Hinton with Valerius Consulting, and today we're going to talk about why it makes sense for you to add change management capabilities to your analytics center of excellence. Now, COEs were adopted by organizations to help accelerate the adoption of analytics capabilities across the enterprise. But what's happened too often is there's resistance that occurs, and primarily in three forms. One is mindsets that are wedded to the status quo. So you get pushback like, your model is not any better than my spreadsheet. Second is tools are perceived to be too complicated. So you might get pushback from a business unit or function. And they say, we don't understand how to use this. I can't get my people to use it. And I don't have time to learn this. So too complicated. And then the final one is the talent mix between what is resident in the analytics COE, which is analytics subject matter experts, and out in the business functions. So some of the pushback you see there is, analytics, but you don't know my business. And that creates some resistance. So the combination of those three things is where you're getting pushback and where you see resistance to the initiatives you're pushing out. So what's needed is change management capabilities that allow people to plan for and adapt to change. So let's take a look at the primary functions of the analytics COE and pull out a couple of examples that will make this more clear. So everything you do from growing technical talent to building and deploying solutions, everything you engage in through your analytics COE is imposing some sort of change on the organization. And the key thing you need to look at is, what is the impact? How do we start to understand the impact? So one way to think about this is whatever you're working on, is it a pebble or rock or a boulder? So in other words, what is the impact that it's having? So a pebble could be where you're just updating a sales forecast model that's been in deployments for a year. So that could be, very small level of impact, small ripple. Another could be a rock, which could be an example of you're rolling out a completely new sales forecasting model that's not been used before. So that's going to create a little bit more ripple inside the organization, and particularly within that business unit. And finally, you look at a boulder. That's going to be huge change, huge ripples throughout the organization. An example there could be, let's say you're rolling out a new e-commerce platform and you're going to swap out, dozens of custom applications. So big change there. So when you think about the change impact, and there's a couple of things you need to think about is, one is that it's not simply about adopting technology. That is important, but it's also about behavioral change, because what the impact you see most often is, particularly with analytics, you'll see impact on the way people work, the way people make decisions. So it's a pretty broad impact. And that's why it's so important to think about change management and adopt change management system. So let's take a look at what that means. So when we talk about change management, one way to think about this is the acronym CALM. So what that stands for is communications, alignment, learning, and measurement. So the first one, communications, is critical. That's the starting point. That's where you establish the why. Why are you doing this system, this program, this initiative? And this is the communication to the stakeholders that are going to be impacted by that. And it's most often the thing that's neglected. So you need consistency, clarity. It needs to be concise, and it has to be continuous in terms of communication. So think about that as like one to many. Alignment is more one-to-one. This is where you're working with stakeholders, understanding the impact and getting lots of feedback. So that's more workshops, one-to-one counseling. So you understand how well your communications are working and whether there is alignment around this initiative. That's a critical piece. Then we get to learning. Learning is really about embedding that behavioral change in the organization and treating it as continuous improvement. And what we're looking for there, and what we like to focus on, is both mindsets and skill sets. Because I talked earlier about the behavioral change around decision-making. So that's where mindsets come into play. And then the skill sets are clear in terms of raising the skill level across the organization. But the other aspect to this learning is that it has to be self-directed, because you can't impose change on people. It has to be adopted. And the self-directed learning is a critical part of that. And finally, there's measurement. So measurement's going to look at all the activities you're doing within change management. Are you following through and doing those? Two is, what is the impact of those changes? Are we seeing any behavioral change? And three is, what are the business results we're seeing as a result of that behavioral change? So that's a continuous cycle across the CALM methodology for change. So three takeaways from this is, one is, you have to start looking for and understanding the level of change that's going to be imposed based on what you're working on, who's going to be impacted and how. And the final thing is putting in place a system for change that you can repeat over and over, that gives you a better chance of having the change stick over time. So thanks for listening. And for more information, you can check out Elder Research /blog, and we'll be talking a little bit more about this topic in the future.